Sister Jazz in the building. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, good. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm going to start off by giving a quick bio of who you are and the work that you do. So, Jasmine is an Atlanta based organizer, narrative builder, and creative producer. And she has led and supported the campaign to abolish the Atlanta Police Department, reallocate city funds from carceral systems into community programs, and enhance local community engagement. And she is also the co founder of the Spoons Consultancy, a Black woman run and staff creative consulting cooperative that specializes in design thinking, brand narrative building, and high impact activations. She is also the organizing director for Community Movement Builders. So, with all that said, thank you, Jasmine, again for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So, I want to start by asking you about what, again, we euphemistically have been calling Cop City. And so, our audience obviously extends outside of Atlanta. If you were to break down for folks what Cop City is,
Mhm.
can you tell folks what that is?
Yes. So earlier this summer, Atlanta City Council attempted to pass an ordinance that would essentially give away over 300 acres of city-owned land to the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is essentially a conglomerate of corporate elites here in the city and supported by city officials. And they plan to use that land to build an urban warfare training facility for the Atlanta Police Department. So there will be explosive testings, a shooting range, and all of this we know was in direct response to the uprisings that happened last summer when folks were, taking to the streets to demand justice, specifically for Rayshard Brooks, who was murdered by the Atlanta Police Department, and larger calls for defunding and abolishing the Atlanta Police Department. And so basically, they want a space to practice new ways to brutalize, harm, and kill Black people, and I think more broadly suppress liberation movements in the city.
And one of the things that they apparently tried to do was to sneak this through. So, can you talk a little bit about what the process has been and how folks even found out that this training center was about to be something that was going to be ushered in through the city council?
Sure. So the ordinance was actually introduced the week after City Council approved the 2022 budget. And during that budgetary process, a number of organizers in the city had been pressuring City Council to actually defund the Atlanta Police Department. And so they passed a budget that actually expanded funding for APD. And then in the subsequent weeks, Joyce Shepard, who is the City Council person for District 12, tried to sneak in this ordinance to give away this land with a lease that no city council person had even seen. And they believed that this would happen without notice. But because organizers had been so hyper focused on the budget campaign, we were paying attention. And so she wasn't able to slide it through as discreetly as she was hoping. And so in the subsequent kind of public safety committee meetings and public finance committee meetings, there were opportunities for us to organize to prevent them from voting on it and ultimately prevent them from passing it in those moments.
And one of the things that they tried to do also was to have some fake public comments on Zoom and so forth. And can you talk about what led, because what's led to that? And I should also mention you're part of an organization called Dark. And so can you tell us a little bit about what Dark is, but then tell us about the process that they've used and some of the tactics, again, that Dark and other organizations who've been in a larger coalition have used to fight back and make sure that the public knows about this?
Sure. So yes, DARK is a campaign to defund the Atlanta Police Department and refund communities. So centered on abolition and the recognition that police, we know, don't keep us safe. We keep each other safe, and we actually need more resources and to be able to support ourselves to prevent the type of quote unquote crime that the city is currently obsessed with. And so yes, city council attempted to have a farcical public comment period where essentially they recruited people to come onto a Zoom line, muted everyone's microphones, prevented folks from being able to give actual input. And so the session was essentially the Atlanta Police Foundation providing a presentation to justify why this center was necessary without actually allowing residents to speak. And so to combat that and to show what actual public comment and public engagement looks like, Dark and coalition members, including community movement builders, Sunrise Movement, and the Democratic Socialists of America came together to host an actual town hall where we could hear what community members wanted, how they felt about the training facility. And we heard resounding no's. Folks in community did not want this. And we heard similar things when we would canvass every single weekend, both in Joyce Shepard's district, since she's the one that introduced the ordinance, but also in the community near where the training facility would be built. And overwhelmingly, people did not know about this plan for the urban warfare training facility. When we did tell them about it, they were alarmed, not only because of the environmental impacts of the facility, the runoff from the explosive testings and the gun ranges being right in their backyard, but also because, they intimately understand the connection between policing and repression of their communities. And so while city council has pretended to try to create this environment of consensus that this is what people want, we know as organizers from actually talking to communities that folks, one, don't know about it. And when they do know about it, they're upset and don't want it.
Yeah, I moderated the town hall, and it was overwhelmingly opposed to this so-called training center. And we actually had, every comment and hitting from all aspects, like you said, hitting from the environmental concerns to the police misconduct, brutality concerns, to the training center, the squash movements concerns. Every aspect was covered. Not one person, and it was a room of over 100 people that there was social distancing in, but over 100 people, not one person commented that they were in support of this training center. And surprisingly, we actually had a couple of elected officials, city council people come to the meeting. And my next question is, at the beginning of this process, it seemed like it was going to sail through without a hitch. The way the city council was approaching this, if I remember my numbers, was 16-0, that it seemed like we're going to in support of this. But because of the organizing that you and others have had, can you tell us where we're at with this process in terms of the city council, maybe not giving up exactly, but seeming to trying to take some more careful steps, let's say, in terms of how they try to push this through because of the backlash that's taken place?
Sure. So during the last city council vote, when we did expect that it would kind of just pass easily, given what we know about city council and their support for policing in the city, they actually tabled it. So they're going to revisit the vote on September 7th. And we obviously see this as a win. We did not expect them to table it, but at the same time, we understand that their strategy over the next 3 weeks is to manufacture consent around this. So they recognize that their sham of a public comment process, that residents recognize that. And so they're trying to build a public narrative that they've heard from community, that since the vote, they've listened, and are planning to actually host more fake public comment sessions to be able to generate that false narrative. So we'll be continuing with our same efforts to actually amplify the voices of residents who, like you mentioned, overwhelmingly don't want this, and to continue to actually talk about the realities that more policing does not actually keep communities safe. It only serves to protect the interests of the elites here in this city.
And you brought this up earlier. It seems like to me the elites in not only Atlanta but across the country, right? These political elites, these government elites, they seem to be trying to shift the narrative since the social justice movements back to a pro-cop narrative, right? Can you speak a little bit about how you think that shifting is happening, how you see that happening in terms of your own work? Because last year, it wasn't like these folks were actually trying to defund either. But last year, the conversation was on a table around shifting some funds. This year, the conversation seems to be more about, quote unquote, supporting the police, more resources and so forth. So you talk a little bit about how you see that shift happening?
Yeah. So, these politicians are only concerned with their ability to be reelected and to capitalize on campaign funds. So they'll do whatever it takes to stay in office. Last year, it was popular to generally support the concept of reallocating funds, even though we know none of them were committed to actually doing that, given that the 2022 budget passed with an increased funding to APD. And now, because of the pandemic, folks are struggling. They've capitalized on this false narrative of, increasing crime in the city. And so they've latched onto that to be able to justify increased resources to the Atlanta Police Department under, the false correlation that more policing would somehow make people more safe. when we know that's not true. There's no research that actually shows that more policing reduces quote unquote crime. And I think largely it's important to also emphasize what we mean and what we talk about when we speak of crime. We know that police are here to enforce laws that criminalize those that push back against capitalism. So they'll arrest the person who stole groceries from Walmart, but have no type of energy for, the corporations that practice wage theft for their workers. And so being able to articulate that narrative to city council members, having them hear that, and then still seeing them make wrong decisions around public safety here in the city just kind of underscores that they're not really thinking about the best interest of community. They're focused on what they need to say to get reelected. And because a bunch of white people in Buckhead are upset that their wealthy haven, is experiencing crime, they're all hyper focused on supporting the perceptions of those white folks, which means more money to policing.
Can you tell us a little bit about if folks wanted to know more information, to get involved, how they can get that information, or where they should go looking for all that?
Sure. Yeah. So if they go to atlDSA.org/StopCopCity, that has a really good timeline of kind of the history of the movement and also kind of ongoing events until the vote on September 7th. So they can find ways to plug in directly there. Lots of opportunities to canvass, lots of opportunities to leave public comment. And I'm assuming, just based on our coalition, that there will also be opportunities to plug into some direct actions as well.
Mm-hmm. And then, it's a slight switch. We didn't talk a little bit more about you. How did you get involved? You are such a dynamic organizer. I've only known you for a short time period, but, been thoroughly impressed by your skills and stuff like that. How did you get involved in organizing on this issue and other issues in your community?
Sure. So I'm from Atlanta. I grew up in Southwest Atlanta. And when I moved back to the city for grad school, I was studying urban planning. So anti-gentrification work, housing work has always been kind of core to the mission that I see and my value add, I think, to community. And last summer, I linked up with some other organizers to start DARK, the campaign to abolish the Atlanta Police Department. And so this Stop Cop City campaign kind of happened right after we had wrapped up our budget campaign, and obviously Cop City directly related to issues of abolition. And so it kind of felt just like a natural campaign for us to start. And obviously, I joined CNB earlier this year too. And, the work to stop gentrification in Pittsburgh specifically is also directly connected to reducing the scope of policing. Police enforce gentrification and kind of keep that cycle going. And so I think it was just natural to invite both organizations to be a part of coalition and to kind of, bring those people together to create the work that we're doing now.
That's fantastic. So Jasmine, I want to thank you so much for this. I know you have a hard stop soon. So I want to thank you so much for coming on with us. We'd love to have you back on again. And Jasmine, again, does great work with DARK. She is the organizing director for Community Movement Builders. And she is leading the battle to stop Cop City, as we call it here in Atlanta. And she is doing great work on that. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thanks for having me. Take care.
Peace.